And give me 1 second.
Three,
Yeah,
two.
yeah.
It's awesome.
Awesome. So we are live. Look, there are three questions that I hear often that stop people from buying their first storage facility. And it's not because they're not smart enough, and it's not because there aren't deals out there, because I can assure you there are, despite what some people think. It's because sometimes when people get stuck and confused, they freeze, they don't take action, and then that causes frustration, and this never-ending cycle. But one of the questions I often hear is, how do you make a deal work when the seller is just completely unrealistic about price? It feels like every storage deal that we go out there and we look at, it's the seller or the broker is asking too much, and oftentimes people just stop there, and I think it's a big mistake. The second question I hear is, where do you get the money? And then how do you structure it so that the deal actually makes sense? So that it cash flows, and or so that there's some equity upside on the back end whenever you go to sell or refinance the property, especially in the interest rate environment that we're in. It's not the interest rate environment from 2022 and the beginning of 2023. This is the new normal. And so we need to adjust. The third question that I often hear is, hey, what does it really take to manage, run, and operate a self storage facility remotely? I can't tell you how many people I talk to when I ask them about their buy box, which is essentially what defines what they're looking for. They want to find something in their backyard because it makes them feel more comfortable. They want to be able to see it, feel it, touch it. They feel like they need to be there. And what I find is that it's really just a knowledge gap of knowing and understanding how to run a remote property, how to remote manage a self storage facility, so that, like, I live in Miami and you can have a facility across the country and it really, really doesn't matter. So, my guest today, Mr. Marc Cohen, is not only a friend, but he's part of our Storage Wins community. He came to me with these three questions, and I invited him to be on the show because if he's got these questions, I can assure you, and I've talked to so many people, these are pretty common questions. I said, hey, Marc, why don't we actually record this so that not only it helps and benefits you, but it helps and benefits everybody else. So, Marc, brother, man, welcome to the show.
Yeah, thanks for having me. Been looking forward to this.
Yeah, man, absolutely. So look, before we get into your questions and we can kind of start to like drill down deeper and help you in that department, before we get into all the deal stuff, I mentioned that you're a big part of the Storage Wins community. And this is one of the reasons I wanted to have you on here. And one of the things I'm most proud about is just the quality of people that we have in our group and our community. Can you just take a minute or two for people that might not know who you are? I know you run a very successful meetup as well, and I've seen pictures. You got a lot of, you understand and know the value of community. Tell people a little bit about yourself and then where you are in your storage journey today.
Yeah, absolutely. So a little bit about myself. Anytime anyone tells me about myself, I wear about 50 different hats. So one thing about myself, I've been teaching for over 20 years. I've also been coaching for over 20 years, but I always wanted to get into business. So 6 years ago was my first business I got into, was real estate investing. And I also became a real estate agent. However, in the long run, so now I'm over 6 years into real estate. Um, Appreciation long run is great, but in the short run, the cash flow just isn't there. So I started to do some research. Should I get into Airbnbs? Did I want to get into car washes, laundromats, all that stuff? But the one thing that stood out to me, where I could take my real estate skill set best, where the transition would be fairly quick, would be self storage. So I joined Storage Wins about 6 months ago, and we'll talk about it probably throughout the podcast. We had some pretty close calls where it almost got a storage facility.
Yeah.
But it's been a great run over these last 6+ months, and we're there. We're almost there. It's going to happen very soon.
Yeah, man, you are knocking on the door. I know you've gotten close on a couple facilities. And again, before we transition into the questions that you have, for people thinking about, like, sometimes one of the things that I always struggle with is when people try to go out there and figure this out on their own. And it's not because they can't, because storage is not a complicated business. In fact, I think even though there's a lot of moving parts, it's not easy, but it is simple. Okay. And I think people tend to overcomplicate this, but I never understood why people would try to figure it out on their own and potentially make an expensive mistake or just take a lot longer. Talk to me a little bit about the impact that the community has had on you, in terms of the relationships, in terms of the support, the guidance, and how you see that playing a factor in your success here moving forward.
Right. Like I said, 6 years ago, I got into real estate. I had mentorship. I was part of like some other communities, but especially in business, without the right mentorship, without the right guidance, you're going to make mistakes that could have definitely been, we say, preventable. So when I joined the community, here's the greatest part of this community. You have over, I believe now we're up to 80 members. And of the 80 members, probably a good chunk of them have a lot of experience, meaning
Yeah.
some own, I think, 10 or more facilities. They've been through the fires. So all that mentorship and guidance is right there out in the open. Everyone's readily available, through calls, texts. Everyone's very readily available because there's going to be circumstances that come up in your storage journey you can't answer, and you have mentorship with people with years or some even with decades of self-storage experience.
Yeah.
So to cut that short, by trying to do it on your own, cut corners, it's inevitable. You're going to make a very costly mistake.
Yeah. Yeah. Not, not just that, Mark, but I was talking to my daughters recently and we were talking about like their friend group, right? And the importance of making sure that you intentionally surround yourself with people that share your same core values, that are going to challenge you, that are going to force you to level up. One of the things I told them and they started laughing, it's like you can't go to the beach and not get water or sand on you. And just like you can't hang around quality people who are doing great things, and it's going to be hard for you not to level up. You start to think different, you start to make better decisions, better choices. And conversely, the opposite is true as well, right? Like if you hang around people that are just watching TV all day or just not looking to level up, it's going to be hard for you to level up. So yeah, man, I appreciate you sharing your perspective. Now let's get into the heart of this. So let me kick it over to you. You reached out to me a couple of weeks ago and you're like, hey, these are some questions I have. And I said, okay, well, why don't we lock in and focus on those? So why don't we start with your first question, which is about overpriced deals? Can you just, I don't know if you have the question in front, but can you just kind of share with everybody that's listening or watching, what question you had, and then we'll start to dissect it and peel the layers of the onion back there?
Absolutely. So right now I'm doing cold calling. I'm doing cold calling on a daily basis. I'm also sending out direct mails. I'm
Okay.
sending out emails to all these storage owners. So probably not once a week. I would say like about 2, 3 times a week. I'm sending out letters of intent for storage facilities. And what happens 95% of the time, the storage owner's not feeling enough pain. So they want a lot more than what it's actually worth. So I'm running into a lot of issues with that. Okay, you want it a lot more than what it's actually worth, but what's my main goal? I got a cash flow. If I'm buying a business, I need to cash flow.
Mm-hmm.
So they're overpricing it so much where my cash flow is very minimal, and then I gotta move on to another facility. So
Okay.
that's been a major issue coming up.
Okay. So there's a lot too that I want to drill down here, and I have a lot of thoughts that I'll share with you. But let me diagnose a little bit further. How many? What's the mindset that you have going into these calls, and when you underwrite the deal and you realize that you're going to need to be in a certain ballpark price range or terms, and we'll talk about price or terms because that's going to be a key arrow in your quiver, so to speak, when a seller is dead set on a particular price. What's the
Mhm.
mindset that you have? Is it just, okay, they're here and you're here and there's too big of a gap? Are you just moving on and never calling them again? Like, walk me through how you're approaching the situation and your mindset, because To me, that is step one. One of the things that you've heard me say inside of our community, we're never trying to convince a seller to agree on a certain price or terms. Okay. Where whenever I connect with a storage owner or a motivated seller or anybody, I'm not looking to buy the deal. I'm looking to earn a second conversation. So my mindset going in is not, I want to go in and I want to go for the kill. Just like when I met my wife, I didn't ask her to marry me, right? I wanted to get to know her. I use that word diagnose. So think of yourself like a doctor. When you walk into a doctor's office, the doctor doesn't just like take out their script book and then write something and hand it to you. Like what does the doctor do, Mark? They ask
They're
they ask
going to
questions,
have,
right?
hopefully, yeah, they're going to ask questions. They're going to have good bedside manner.
Exactly. They're going to ask you questions like, "Hey, Mark, what are you feeling? Tell me about what's going on. Where does it hurt? How long has this been going?" Like, they're going to ask you questions because they're trying to get to the root cause of the problem. So, first and foremost, I think you have to understand the mindset of this is very, very important. So, when you go into these conversations, do you have a mindset where like, "Hey, I'm trying to get I'm trying to buy a deal here. I'm trying to connect with somebody who's a ready, willing, and able seller, and let's move this along as quickly as possible." Or are you approaching it? And there's, again, don't, I want you to tell me how you're really approaching it, because I think if you shift your mindset just a little bit, it can start to open up more doors and opportunities for you.
Yeah. So initially, because like I said at the beginning, my time is very short, especially during the day. So I only have about 30 minutes to do the cold calling during the day. So I'm doing I was doing a rapid fire. Are you
Mm,
interested? Basically, are you interested in selling now, or maybe later?
yep.
So basically, it was rapid fire. But then I was realizing something. I'm not building the proper rapport and the proper trust with them. So they're not really opening up. I
Yep.
wasn't getting enough pain points. So what I would do, I would make note on my pad, trust rapport. So I'm trying to get the deal first, build the trust, build rapport, and then everything would probably trickle down after that. So I made that correction midway through. Do I sometimes still do rapid fire? Yes. And then when I get hung up on, I'm like, oh, why didn't I just try to build a little bit more trust and rapport? So
Yeah.
I got to do a better job with that. I have, and it's been a lot better. It's definitely
Yeah.
been a lot better.
Well, look, good for you for having that level of awareness that you were just kind of going in and you were like asking people to marry you. You weren't taking time to like
Mhm.
understand their situation. Essentially, you were that doctor saying, "Hey, like here's a prescription," without asking any questions. Now, it's a little bit tricky because I understand you have a very limited window of time in which to make those calls, which is why I would encourage you, like when you're not working like on a Saturday morning, that's also an opportunity for you to get some calls in. And then this isn't the topic of this particular show and the questions that you have, but I think it would be helpful. As you know, we have several people inside of our Storage Wins community that part of their deal flow machine is having a virtual assistant that's making calls on their behalf. As you know, we have one member
Mhm.
who's wholesaled a bunch of deals inside the community, and he just has virtual assistant making phone calls and then handing him on a silver platter the sellers that raise their hand and say, "Yes, I'm interested in selling." So there is something to be said for quantity, meaning that when it's cold calling, it's a numbers game, right? You're not gonna, most people you connect with are not gonna be interested in selling. And if they are, they're probably not selling at where you need to be. So understand, I want you to have a long-term mindset that it's gonna take reps and quantity. And at the same time, I don't think you have to sacrifice quality. And quality means having the mindset where you're going in, earning a second conversation. There's very few storage deals. Let me back up. There's very few deals in general that I have done where I'm doing it on the first call. Like first time I ever speak to the person. Yes, I've done those deals primarily in single family, but in storage, oftentimes it's going to take a series of contacts. And that's why one of the things I always share is the backbone of this business is relationships, and relationships, the foundation of that is meaningful conversations, and conversations lead to contacts lead to conversions lead to contracts, and then contracts ultimately turn into cash and cash flow. So big picture, have the mindset where you're seeking to connect with a person, figure out if they are open to selling, why would they sell? So I've read so many books just about sales and persuasion and influence. Oren Klaff, he's Flip the Script is a great book, and Pitch Anything. And he talks a lot
Mhm.
about frame control, and he talks a lot about like staying a step behind them, sometimes pushing them in the opposite direction, what's called going negative. And so, sometimes I'll connect with a storage owner, Mark, and if they are open to selling, I might push back on them, say like, Mr. and Mrs. Seller, like it looks like you have a beautiful facility. Based on what you're sharing with me, seems like it's performing really well. Like, why would you even want to sell this? And oftentimes people are like, well, why would you ask that question? Aren't you like planting a seed of doubt in their mind? Well, maybe, but I'm not going to be the one chasing them. I'm going to find out why at the end of the day do they want to sell. And as you know, oftentimes in the self-storage space, these owners want to sell because they're older and they're ready to slow down. Oftentimes they want to retire, they want to travel. In residential real estate, most of the time it's about financial distress. It can be circumstantial, like death, divorce, job transfer. And then sometimes it's physical distress, the actual property itself. In storage, more times than not, they are ready to slow down. They're ready to retire. And so you can go into the conversation not with that preconceived mindset that they're, because you have to ask them, but I like to future pace and I like to ask them, well, like, if you did decide to sell, like, what would you even do with your time and money? Like, what's most important to you? And I will start to stretch the gap between where they are now and ultimately what they want. But there's one thing that I think is super important, Mark. Whenever you connect with people that want a really, really high price and they're dead set on the price, I will ask them in a non-confrontational way, like, hey, Mark, just curious, I understand that you're looking for 2.2 million on this storage facility. Just curious, how did you arrive at that number? And I'll just ask them, and I'm not doing it in a way to challenge them. I'm doing it because I want to understand their thinking. Did they just hear that that's what the facility is worth? Is it based on the net operating income, which, as you know, is how we truly value these facilities? And I've always said we will buy on pro forma, meaning we will buy on the upside, but we're not going to pay for pro forma. And there's a
Mhm.
key difference between the two. Many times these sellers want you to pay for the value that they have not created. And so sometimes I find, Mark, depending on the seller's personality, that it's a matter of educating them and explaining to them, again, not in a threatening or confrontational way. Think of you and the seller sitting alongside each other, not across the table, going back and forth negotiating. So sometimes I'll just ask very open-ended questions like, hey, Mark, I understand you're looking for 2.2 million. I'd love to get that for you. Just curious, how did you arrive at that number? Like walk me through how the facility's worth the 2.2. And I think tonality matters in how you ask the question. I think the timing when you ask, like when I connect with a seller, Mark, I'm generally speaking, I'm not talking about price or terms or anything like that within the first 3 to 5 minutes of that conversation. I'm asking them about them. I'm asking them about their situation. I'm asking them about what they want. I'm trying to diagnose, is there a pain point? Is there a desire that they want? Are they more motivated by pain because they want to get away from the situation? Sometimes it's, hey, I'm tired of managing it. I'm this and that, and that there's pain there. And sometimes it's more about desire. And it's more about like, oh, I'm just looking to slow down. I want to travel. I want to spend more time with my grandkids. And so I'm asking questions to figure out, are they more motivated by pain or pleasure? And then when I understand what that is, I'm going to start to stretch that gap. So, and I don't know if you're going into these conversations and are you talking about price or terms like within the first 3 to 5 minutes?
Um, well, initially, yes. So when I started to cold call, yes, it was rapid fire. Are you interested in selling?
Yeah.
Would you mind if I ask you a few questions about your facility? Now I try to build rapport. How would this sale affect you, change your life? Is there is running this facility now a detriment to the way you foresee yourself living in retirement? So now I'm a lot more relationship based as
Okay.
opposed to just trying to get a deal. I mean, for the one that I almost got a property, the rapid fire worked, but it was an aberration. That was an aberration.
Yeah. And look,
Most one, one
I'm not Yeah, sorry to interrupt you, man. I was gonna say I'm not suggesting that the rapid fire approach couldn't work. I'm sure it could with enough volume and repetition. Eventually, you're gonna
Hmm.
connect with somebody. I just don't think it's the maybe the best approach in terms of because you know how many times I've bought a storage facility or a property where I know for a fact that was not the highest offer, but that seller had faith and confidence and trust in me to get the deal done. So sometimes owners understand will exchange a lower price for more certainty or for
Yep.
speed and convenience. So don't have the mindset that it's always about the highest price. And if you connect with a seller, which let's be honest, many are like this, where they're dead set on a certain number, be okay with that not being your seller that you're buying a deal from. Be okay with making sure that that person is now in your follow up system and you have the mindset and approach where you're going to continue to build a relationship over time. It's like, when we have movie nights here at my house with my daughters, they love to eat popcorn. I put a bag in the microwave. It's not ready in 10 seconds. Like it takes 3 minutes, 3.5 minutes before it's like, okay, now we can eat the popcorn. Kind of the same thing with storage, and understand that most people you connect with, that that microwave's never going to go off because you're not ready right now, but it's your job to stay in front of them, to build rapport, to figure out how you can add value to them based on their situation. Mark, sometimes when I realize that I'm not going to be the solution for that person, sometimes, hey, do you mind, Mark, if I share with you a few things that have worked for me in my storage business that I think could really help you? I've
Hmm.
never, ever had somebody tell me, no, Alex, I don't want to hear that. And I'll give them a tip, or I'll share something that can help them, whether it's on their website or their Google My Business listing, or the fact that they don't have that many customer reviews. And customer reviews, as you know, online are really, really important. So I'll do something to add value and contribute because that is a way to build rapport, and it's something oftentimes people don't do because they're thinking so transactionally. They're not thinking relationally. Now, when you do talk to somebody who's dead set on price, so one of the questions I'll always ask is, "Hey, Mark, if I could get you this certain price, whatever that number is, and by the way, I'm not sure that I could, but if I could, would you be willing to take payments over time, or would you be willing to get creative about how I pay you that?" Or would you consider? I love to use the words would you consider because I feel like that word alone opens up more doors and avenues for you to keep the conversation going. And that's really my goal and objective here when I'm speaking to a seller. It's not only to earn a second conversation, it's to keep the conversation going. I'm limiting the amount of close ended questions I'm asking where they're going to say yes or no. I'm looking to get them talking. And I also have the mentality that I want them to be doing 80 to 90% of the talking and me doing 10 to 20% of the listening. If that is reversed, I think you're doing it wrong. I think if you're the one yap, 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 talking, 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 and they're not doing, you're probably not going to connect with that seller. Okay, so do you ask about terms when they're dead set on a certain price?
Yeah. Oh, it comes up anytime they're high. If they're willing to do some type of seller finance payment over time, you would actually find probably 50% of the owners don't truly understand what seller finance is. So
Fair enough.
basically, explain it's just payments over time, and we could probably not probably most more likely get your price, but you have to get my terms.
Okay. Are
And
you,
a lot. Yep.
no, go ahead, more. Go ahead.
Yeah, and a lot of times they're willing to at least get a letter of intent with a basic format as to how the seller finance would work, and we just discuss it.
When you're talking to them,
What work for them?
are you using the words seller finance? Are you using like industry terms like that?
Uh, if I get the vibe that it's someone who's fairly savvy, understands business, I will say seller finance. Otherwise, I would
Okay.
say payments over time or
Okay.
installments over time, just to simplify it for them.
Yeah. And I would recommend and advise that you go with the latter, even if you get a sense that they're savvy. To your point, I find that more times than not, these mom and pop storage owners, I think 50-50 is probably a fair assessment. 50% of the time they understand seller financing. And I remember when I juxtaposed that to my single family days, probably 90% of the time they didn't understand seller financing. Very few motivated homeowners would understand how seller. So I pretty much avoid using industry terms like seller.
Hmm.
Not that it's super complicated, but I just prefer to say, hey, Mark, if I can get you closer to your number, would you let me get creative on how I pay you? Or would you consider allowing me to pay you what you want over a period of time? So I try to dumb it down. I have the mindset where I'm like speaking like a fifth grader to a fifth grader
Hmm.
because a confused mind says no. And so I don't want to give them a reason to be confused and to say no and stop the conversation. And we've talked about this a lot inside of our Storage Wins community, but more times than not, I will give you your price as long as it's like within reality, right? Like, remember, were you on that call probably like a year and a half ago? And I don't think you were because you haven't been part of the community that long, but one of our members brought up a deal that was like 10,000 net rentable square feet. And the seller was asking $10 million. Now, obviously, that's not based in reality. So seller financing is not going to fix that problem. So, but most of the time, as long as it's within reason, I'll pay above market value, quote unquote, as long as I can dictate the terms, and that's the interest rate, the length of the loan, and the down payment. All right. So
Hmm.
these are just some tools to have in your belt. And I know that you know this, but I think the big shift for you now is avoid the quick, let's just get to it. Do you want to get married type of thing? And let's go a little bit slower. Let's just try to earn another conversation and understand and be okay that they might be at this price and you might be all the way down here and they might not be open to seller financing, but I will still more times than not make the offer. And the way that I set that up, it's like, hey, Mark, I understand you're looking for 2.2 million. Quite honestly, just based on the income that your business is generating today and how we evaluate these opportunities, because the value of the business is determined by the income that the business is producing and generating. I'm going to go out and need to get a bank loan. And banks are going to require something called a debt service coverage ratio. And that's probably the only time I'll use an industry term. And then I will always follow up and explain it's if I go out and I borrow and I have to pay the bank $100,000 a year, that bank wants to see that the business is generating at least 25 cents above that. Meaning that business is going to have to generate $125,000 to $130,000 of net operating income in order to service and pay that $100,000 annual debt. And so I wouldn't even be able to go out and qualify for a loan unless I can show that. And sometimes I will actually walk the seller. I'm not going to like pull out the spreadsheet or anything, but like I'll walk the seller in just basic math, how I'm arriving at that number and why I wouldn't even be able to pay their number even if I wanted to. Have you ever done that?
Yeah, I do the same. Yeah,
Okay.
I do the three offer model where this is what I could do with cash. It's going to be incredibly low because cash costs money. I've shown the bank with the interest rates. Expect something between 7% interest, and then with seller financing, I could get up to your price,
Yeah.
but it would be based on installments. If they want something really high, as you shown in Storage Wins, there may have to be some deferment of payments, or initially there might be a very low interest rate, and then we can always escalate the interest rate as you go on once the facility is stabilized.
That's right.
And
That's
I, I
right.
go I go over all that with them. But yeah, it's very hard, especially now, to get a lot of these prices to work with just bank financing. I find there has to be at least some of that price has to come through some type of deferment or some type of installment.
Yeah. And look, understand that we don't go out and find value. And I believe that is one of the things that a lot of people are getting wrong when they're going out looking for deals. We don't look for deals. We don't find value. We create value. And we can create value based on how we structure the deal, based on seller financing, based on several factors. We create value. That's how we're getting paid, by creating value, not just as when we operate the deal, but how we structure the deal and how we come to a win-win with that seller. The other thing to share, Mark, is that sometimes you really have to educate the seller that more times than not, the expenses that they incur in order to manage and operate that facility are going to be far less than the expenses you and I are going to incur because we're remote managing. Not to mention, not only are we going to remote manage, but when we buy that facility, chances are taxes are going to go up because their cost basis from when they bought it or built it years ago is far less than what we're going to be paying for it. So sometimes it's just a matter of planting seeds and educating them that, hey, listen, when I buy this facility, my taxes are going to go up based on the purchase price. Okay, insurance these days is a lot more expensive, especially if you're on a coastal market. If you're, on the coast of Louisiana, Florida, like there's certain markets where because of hurricanes, et cetera, or whatever the case, you're going to be paying more in insurance. You're going to have a boots on the ground team member. If the facility's big enough where it generates a certain amount of revenue, you might have third-party management. And so oftentimes I will just walk the seller through the fact that, hey, I understand your expenses are here. My expenses would be here because I live in Miami. I'm not self-managing the property that's in Oklahoma or North Carolina or South Carolina. And then once I start to see that, okay, they have a level of understanding and like we're side by side and we're just like, I'm sharing with them how I'm coming up with them, it's easier to justify my price or terms. And it doesn't always mean it's going to work, but I find that it's a lot quicker of a path to start to bridge that gap and there's a better understanding versus if I just got on the phone and say, hey, Mark, are you interested in selling? Yeah, I would consider an offer. I'm looking for 2.2. Oh, Mark, I'm going to be at 1.1, right? And there's no context. There's no explanation. There's no rapport building. It's going to be a lot more difficult to bridge that gap.
Right. So, I mean, that's another thing that I try to keep in mind. This is a numbers game. I'm not trying to give you the lowest possible offer. I'm trying to make it as much of a win-win as possible.
Mm-hmm.
So if I'm buying a facility, we have to profit, and I show them exactly what we need to take place in order for us to profit. So I make it a numbers thing. I'm trying to give you the lowest possible offer, and this is what I come up with. If it's good enough, great. If not, we'll move on, and best of luck to you.
Yeah.
And this is someone I would probably follow up with in the near future.
I love everything you said, but I want to clarify one quick thing. I heard you say lowest possible offer. Do you tell them that?
No, 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 no.
Okay, okay,
I,
okay,
I have that mindset that I'm
okay.
not trying to give you the lowest possible offer. I'm not going to
Got it,
tell
got
them
it, got it.
tell them
Okay,
that.
perfect. Because I was going to suggest, in fact, I'm telling them I'm looking to pay as much as I can possibly pay that the deal can afford based on the debt that I need to get in order to buy the facility. Because most of the time we're not buying these facilities all cash. Unless it's a smaller deal, low price deal, right? We've had some members in our community that have been able to buy some facilities cash, but most of the time we need to get some level. We need to either get private money, or we're bringing on an equity partner, or we're getting bank financing. You have to explain that to them. And to your point, based on where interest rates are at these days, that debt is going to cost me more than it was 3, 4, 5 years ago. And so I find big picture, because I think there's a lot we've covered, and I know you have a few more questions I want to dive into, is I think the mindset of earning a second conversation, of seeking to connect with that person, build rapport, diagnose by asking questions, figure out if they're more motivated by pain or pleasure. Once you figure that out, start to stretch the gap. Again, you want to be listening, doing 20% of the talking, 80% listening, and have them do the reverse. You want to get them to open up. And so sometimes I'll seek for ways to connect with them. I like to take notes on conversations, and then I'll have my assistant put those notes into our CRM so that when we follow up with them, I can start to reference those things. And I'm always listening, Mark, to the little tidbits of nuggets that don't seem important, but they are. Hey, I just got back from Disney with my grandkids. or I'm going on a trip. That might seem insignificant. I'm actually jotting that down because next time I connect with that person, I'm going to bring that up. Or, hey, I was just, or whatever the case might be. I wouldn't lie, obviously, but like, that today I'm traveling to Europe. So if I understand
Mhm.
if I know that that person is interested in travel, I'll relate to my travel experiences as a way to connect with them. Okay. So,
Absolutely. I mean, the main thing with this, you have to stand out. They're probably getting multiple offers a week. You have to stand out.
yep.
You have to show something why they would remember you. So in a positive way. So that's what I try to do. I have a CRM too. Any tidbits that they tell me, it's all written down. I'm taking diligent notes. I'm listening. That's the main thing. 85 to 90% of the time, you are just listening. Let them go. Let them go. Get as much information as possible. And like I said, I was close a few times.
Yeah. Well, man, you know that the only way this is not going to work for you, and I know it will, is if you stop, quit, or are just inconsistent. Okay. But if you
Mhm.
have that mindset where, and that's why tracking your numbers, your key performance indicators, a certain number of meaningful conversations every single day, a certain number of deals that you're analyzing every single day, a certain number of offers you're making every single week. If you do that consistently, it's not if this is going to work, it's when. And then obviously
Exactly.
continue to lean into the community, like ask questions, connect with people. By the way, that you can jump into that group of storage winners that gets together on Monday afternoons to do live
Yep,
cold
I've done
calling.
it. I've done it before.
Okay,
Hmm.
has that been helpful and beneficial for you?
Well, because of time during the school year, I've only done it twice before, but
Okay.
it was great just hearing everyone
Yeah.
doing their cold calling and seeing what works for them and what maybe we could all do a little bit better of.
And that's it. That's all you're doing is you're trying to pick up a little nugget or two because different people with different personality types, they have different approaches. And there isn't necessarily a right or wrong. You have to kind of find your lane and what works for you.
Exactly.
Awesome, man. All right. Do we want to move on to your second question, which I think has to do with the money part of it?
Sure.
Okay. So what do you? So yeah, just go ahead if you want to ask the question, just so everybody understands what we're going to focus on here.
Um, the money one, which was so we covered when it's overpriced, and then the second one was just being in the high interest rate environment, the debt stacking. So a lot of times we'll make these creative offers, but we're stacking on debt, and you keep stacking up debt, the deal still isn't going to pan out. So
Yep.
that's another issue we've been coming through when we're underwriting. Okay, because also with me, I want to put as little money down as possible. So what
Okay.
does that mean? The money has to come from somewhere. I have to pay for that extra debt. So when I'm taking on all this extra debt, the numbers aren't panning out, or we want to refi ideally within a 5-8 year period, but
Mm-hmm.
based on all this debt, we would have to refi in 50 years. So that's something else I've been
Yeah.
running into a little bit of difficulty.
Yeah, look, one of the things I do when I start to look at a deal and I start to underwrite it, I'm always looking at it from a couple different lenses. I'm looking at how does this deal look if I was going to structure it with debt, meaning if I was going to go out and borrow money to get into the deal. And this is a whole another that's not going to be the focus of this conversation, and maybe we can tackle that another time because there's a big debate about leverage and borrowing money and you know uh, you got to be very careful. Debt can be a great tool. It can also be a destroyer. And we got to make sure that whenever we look at these deals, that we're approaching them with a conservative lens and we have a fudge factor. We got wiggle room. We don't ever buy a deal based on the best case scenario. We're buying a deal based on the worst case scenario to a likely scenario. Okay, now I'm looking at it through two lenses. I'm looking at it, okay, if I was going to go get 70% bank financing, and then let's say I didn't have any money, okay, and there's several people that have bought facilities in our community that haven't had to put in their own money. To your point, that money has to come from somewhere. Now, is it better to structure it as debt where you're going to go out and get a private lender, or maybe you're tapping into a line of credit or something along those lines? Or is it better to structure it to bring on an equity partner? Now, understand, generally speaking, that if you bring on an equity partner, meaning somebody that's going to inject the cash needed to get into the deal, you're going to have to give up a percentage of that deal. You're giving up some form of equity, okay? In the long run, that will likely be the most expensive way to get into the deal. But that doesn't mean you shouldn't do it. Because to your point, Mark, sometimes we look at a deal, and when you factor in a 6.5 or a 7% interest rate when you go get a bank loan, and then you're paying 8 to 12% to a private lender, all of a sudden now you're upside down, and that deal's not cash flowing. So there's a couple different things to think about. What does the deal look like if you were going to borrow the money with bank financing and or private money? And does the deal work from a cash flow perspective? And sometimes it doesn't. But then the question is, maybe it's not a cash flow deal. Maybe it's a future equity upside play. Like I've looked at deals that the cash flow is very, very thin, but you could potentially double the value within a 3 to 5 year period. And that's where you have to filter it through your goals and your buy box blueprint and ask yourself, well, are you willing to forego cash flow on the front end because you see a lot of juice on the back end? Meaning you see where you can create a lot of value and either sell or refi. But if you're going to do that, make sure that you're protected. I don't want you to get into a deal and ever have to come out of pocket or not have enough reserves or not be able to carry that facility. And so if I'm going to do that, I'm going to look at that deal very, very conservatively. I might not assume that I'm going to get to 88 or 90% occupancy. I would pressure test a deal and run it and say, hey, what would this deal look like if it only achieved 80% occupancy? Can I make those numbers work if I was going to borrow the money? And if I can't, then I'm going to switch and say, okay, well, if I was going to bring on an equity partner and that equity partner wanted to earn, let's say 10 to 15% cash on cash return, at least by the end of year 2, could I structure it in a way where it could make sense for an equity partner where I don't have to borrow additional capital? Does that make sense, Mark?
Yeah, totally. Because you might give away equity, but at least you'll be cash flowing a little bit, and you're not negative cash flow every month. Which could be pretty stressful.
That's right.
But like you said, if you have the reserves, you plan for it, you could possibly do it that way.
Yeah, look,
where you get appreciation every 5 years.
100%. Like I was looking at a deal with another Storage Wins member that they were going to be slightly, it wasn't much, but it was still negative cash flow for like the first 6 to 7 months. And then in month 8 or 9, I think is where the deal turned based on some conservative move-in projections. What we call a net move-in is like if we have 4 people move in and 1 person move out in a given month, that's a net move-in of 3. We had 3 positive net move-ins. Well, we were looking at this deal and he was being overly optimistic, I thought, based on the market with the move-ins, the projections. And I think he was banking on 4 or 5 net move-ins a month. And I said, look, it's not outside the realm of possibility that you can achieve that, but let's be a little bit more conservative. Let's assume 1 to 2 net move-ins a month. And how much longer would it take you to get to positive cash flow? And let's account for that in terms of how much money we're borrowing to make sure that the deal can support itself. Because I don't want you or anybody coming out of pocket to fund the operations of this business. The business needs to be able to support itself. And some of that can be mitigated by how it's structured. And when you look at the deal, Mark, we need to determine, does it make more sense to structure this with debt? Does it make more sense to structure this with equity? And you have to ask yourself, what's your end goal? If it's cash flow, then we need to make sure that there's a healthy amount of cash flow early on in that deal. I don't want you being razor thin where all of a sudden one of your projections is off and it flips and now you're negative cash flow. And you didn't account for that. So while it's impossible to account for every little detail before we buy a deal, you have to give yourself some room that some things are going to pop up. We want to make sure that we have some buffer there. We want to make sure that we have a fudge factor, which is why I like to look at these deals with more of a conservative lens, conservative to likely scenario, and never buying on a best case scenario.
Oh, exactly. If you're buying in the best case scenario, it's rarely gonna happen. So
Yeah.
best play, just make sure you have a buffer, you have reserves, and then I would feel comfortable. For myself personally, I don't think I would feel comfortable if I'm not cash flowing at least a little bit. That's just my personal preference. I know some in the storage wins, they might be negative for 5, 6 months. They're okay with that. For me, I wouldn't want to take that risk, but
Yeah. Yeah. No.
that's my objective.
Yep, I understand. And look, sometimes when you find that when you're borrowing the money, it doesn't work. That's where I reintroduce the conversation of seller financing. Because when you are able to structure seller financing, like I did at my Florida facility, like when you go to a bank, you're going to amortize that loan, or they're going to amortize that loan over 20 or 25 years. When I structured seller financing on that deal, I did 35-year amortization. So what did that do? That lowered my debt service payments, which created additional cash flow. At the time that I negotiated that deal, I think rates were like at 4.5 to 5%. I negotiated a 3.25% fixed interest rate for 5 years with the option to extend the loan. And so I can't go to a bank and say, hey, I want to pay a 3.25% interest rate. Now, because we've talked about it, I always like to go, when I am going to go to a bank, I like to go to the small local community banks that don't have much of a big name or a national brand. Like, we're not going to Chase and Wells Fargo and Regions. We're going to the savings and loan, the university credit union, the small bank that maybe doesn't have many branches. It's a lot easier to build a relationship with the loan officer or the branch manager, and you can oftentimes negotiate better terms, and making a few tweaks on going from a 7% interest rate to a 6.4 or a 6.5, going from a 20-year amortization to a 25 or a 30-year amortization. Those little levers that you pull all of a sudden can improve the numbers positively in your direction.
Yeah, and sometimes the local banks do have some specials. Maybe for a year or two stretch, you might get it under 6%. So yeah, I definitely shop around. You could look at different mortgage brokers, every avenue, the SBA route. There's so many different routes to get that best interest rate.
Yeah, yeah. And look, the I think the last thing I'll mention, because we could talk about this for hours, man. One of the biggest risks that I think people don't account for when they're buying a commercial asset like self-storage is the loan term, right? I think a small window in which you have to pay off or refinance that loan introduces a lot of risk. There was you hear about the Brandon Turner situation with that big
Hmm.
60 or 70 million dollar multifamily. It's not that Brandon Turner, uh, it, it was the debt that killed the deal, because by all accounts, based on what he shared and what I've read, the deal worked on paper and the deal worked in reality until it didn't, because the rate flipped. And all of a sudden, the rate went from here to here, and now he has to service that debt more. It killed his cash flow. And all of a sudden now it starts to put a lot of stress and pressure on the deal. And so make sure that whenever you're getting into a deal and you're borrowing the money, whether it's from a bank, a private lender, seller financing, give yourself the longest term possible to potentially weather any storms. Super, super important.
Yeah, definitely. That's why with the balloon payment, I want at least 5 years or longer just to protect ourselves.
Yeah, yeah. And even like the first deal I bought, that 43,000 square foot facility, it was I got 85% financing from the Small Business Administration. That was a 3-year note. And I sold that deal. You would think I'm lying. I sold it on the 36 month. Literally, I
Oh wow.
sold that deal. I bought that deal September of 2021. I sold it at the beginning of October 2024. Like literally the 36 month, my rate was going from a 4.5 and it was shooting up to like 8.2, I think at the time, or something along the. I mean, my rate was almost doubling. It was going to absolutely destroy my cash flow. All right. So don't,
Exactly.
Give yourself enough time and make sure that you have multiple exit strategies. It's so important that you determine the exit before you ever enter the deal. And that could be
Exactly.
selling, that
Stretch
could
out
be
that fixed
refining.
rate as long as you can.
Yeah, sorry, what were you saying?
That's what I said. Yeah, stretch out that fixed rate as long as you can, or that beneficial rate as long as you can. Because, like you said, you go from a 3 or a 4 to an 8%. That's a big difference. That might cause you to go underwater.
Yeah, for sure. And look, Mark, I think the last thing I mentioned before we move on to your last question, if you're trying to force a deal, if it feels like you're trying to like shove a square into a circle or vice versa, that's a red flag. In fact, I would recommend that you try to kill the deal. And if you can't kill the deal, then you know you got something. So
Hmm.
if it doesn't work when you're analyzing the deal, if it doesn't work with debt or with equity, and you're trying to pull all these levers and maneuver it just so you can like squeak by, the deal's too thin. Okay, so that means that you need to adjust price or terms. Something needs to shift for you to be able to make sure that deal is healthy enough where you have cushion and it works. Because the idea here, as you know, Mark, is not just to buy a storage facility. Pretty much anybody I feel like can buy a storage facility. It's buying the right facility. It's buying a healthy facility, one that's going to make us money. And that could potentially be short term to long run, or that could potentially be mid to long run. It just depends on the deal. But we need to go into these deals eyes wide open, having for accounted for as many things as possible. And give yourself a little bit of room that you're not going to know every single detail. I don't know anybody who's ever bought a deal that has been 1000% confident about every aspect of that deal. There's always going to be an unknown, there's always going to be some uncertainty. But the confidence comes from the preparation, and that comes from plugging in, doing the reps, going through the due diligence process, getting multiple sets of eyes on that deal. And that's one of the huge benefits that you've experienced being a part of Storage Wins, is getting on the phone with people, not just on our weekly calls, but in between calls. Hey, I want to get an extra set of eyes on this. Like you've done that with me. That's going to give you more confidence, because sometimes we have blind spots. And sometimes we're so anxious to get that first deal that you're prone to make a mistake. You know what I mean?
Yeah, we got to realize we're novices at this. You you go over in your head. You probably thought about like 50 different scenarios, but if you share with someone who's done it probably 10 or more times, they see a different angle, and that angle will save you a lot of money.
Yeah, yeah, absolutely. Well, man, as we start to kind of shift here, and I want to keep this to an hour or so, no more. But your last question was about operations, and what was it? Refresh my
Hmm.
memory. Was it a question about like how do you manage and operate these facilities remotely?
Correct. So basically, we're going to have an unmanned facility. I live in Long Island, specifically in Long Beach. I'm not getting a facility that is going to be close. So it's going to have to be an unmanned remote facility, someplace that's probably at least two hours or further away. So what's the best way to stack up all the technology, especially now with AI coming out? There's probably a lot of things that we could do to keep it unmanned,
Yeah.
and probably just need a boots on the ground.
Yeah. Well, look, man, I would encourage you inside the Storage Wins school group. There's a post in there by Jeremy, and Jeremy and Marianne. They have two facilities that they've bought, and now they're working on a third. They've done a great job of leveraging AI, so they have an AI agent who's their call center. Uh, to your point, it's incredible what we can do now with AI. So I would encourage you to check out that post, and maybe we can do a separate uh, conversation video just on AI as it relates to the impact it's having on storage. But big picture, you use the words unmanned. The way that we manage and operate these facilities remotely is with a three-prong management approach. Okay, and this is something I learned years ago from a mentor of mine, and it still works to this day. Is number one, understand that every single storage facility you buy, whether it's big or small, you're going to have a local boots on the ground team member. And that boots on the ground team member, the compensation, generally speaking, depending on the market, it's going to be somewhere between $200 and $600 per month. So it's very, very inexpensive. Now, for those people that might be like questioning, like, how is it only $200 to $600 per month? Understand that that person might be working 5 to 10 hours a month. Their job is to be at the
Hmm.
facility once or twice a week to make sure the facility's clean, to do lock audits, unit cleanouts, take pictures for auctions when a customer becomes delinquent. Uh, that person, and we have a very specific standard operating procedure and checklist for the boots on the ground. You know that we show you inside the community where to find those people. As a side tip, I love checking with the local fire department. Sometimes we will check with the local customer base, especially if they've been renting there for years and they know the facility. And so every facility is going to have a local boots on the ground team member. Then you need to determine, is the facility you're buying to manage and operate, is the facility big enough, and does the revenue support third party management? If you want to do third party management, like that's how I've run my facilities. I work with a reputable third party management company who handles the day to day operations. They have a call center, and then we have a storage CRM system. We've just switched from StoreEdge to Cubby, so now we're on Cubby, and this is a software solution built for the self storage business. Okay, so between our local boots on the ground team member, the third party management company that has a call center, and our Cubby software, this is how I'm able to run, manage, and operate facilities remotely from literally anywhere in the world. Like, I'm traveling to Europe today with the family for a couple of weeks. I don't have a care or worry about how the storage facilities are going to be managed and operate. It's the same process if
Hmm.
I'm here in Miami or if I'm in Paris or Croatia. Okay. Now, if the facility is not big enough or doesn't have enough revenue to support third party management, then you're likely going to bring management in house. Meaning, and that's how several of our Storage Wins members have done it, where now you or somebody on your team is responsible for managing your local boots on the ground team member. And then you get to determine, do you want to use a call center to take the calls? Or is the facility small enough where you want to service the calls yourself? It really did, like in your case, Mark, because of your job as a teacher and coach, you're probably going to have, you're not probably, you're definitely going to have a local boots on the ground team member. You're likely going to have a call center, and then you're going to have your storage CRM software solution.
Yep.
And that call center can be an actual call center with live humans picking up the phone and walking, potential prospects and customers through the process, or it could be an AI agent who's handling and assisting a lot of the calls. You have options now, but big picture. Oh, one last thing. I like to buy facilities that have, and sometimes I have to install it, an automated gate, which is tied to a cloud software. Meaning, if a customer is delinquent, on the first day that they're delinquent, their gate code stops working. And now they cannot access the facility unless they like tail somebody in. Either way, once they get to their unit, if our boots on the ground team member is doing his job, there's going to be an overlock on the hasp. So now, even though they can put their code in and open, there's going to be a lock that prevents them from accessing their stuff.
Yeah, no, perfect. I mean, I do a lot of that for my rentals. I haven't been to some of my rentals in 3, 4 years. Why? Because we have systems, we have management, we have software. So that's the beauty part of storage. You don't have to be so hands on. You can do a lot of it remotely, just utilizing the technology, as you just said.
Yeah. Man, these days, automation and technology allows us to confidently manage, operate, and run these facilities from anywhere in the world. Whereas, go back 20, 30 years ago, it probably wouldn't have been possible. It would have required the old school, traditional way of managing a storage facility where you had to have an employee, somebody in the office. As you know, man, at all the facilities I'm a part of, we don't have anybody there. The office is locked. Like, there is nobody. If a customer wants to rent a unit, they pick up the phone and call the call center, or they scan the QR code, go to our website, they can select their unit, self checkout, go through the process. They get text their gate code, they enter the facility, the text and email tells them where their unit is. They roll up the door. There's a lock ready for them where the plastic has been cut. They take the lock out, they secure it. Everything happens automatically.
Yeah, no, it's a beautiful thing. As long as the system and processes are established, combined with technology, it could work out great.
Yeah, 100%. So I want to kind of put a bow on this. If you've been watching, listening, and you have questions about feeling like the facility has to be in your backyard because you want to see it, feel it, touch it, that's fine. There's nothing wrong, especially if you live in a really, really good market that has a lot of demand for storage and the market has strong demographics, then that's fantastic. In fact, I think driving for dollars and going in and stopping and meeting storage owners face to face, I think there's a tremendous amount of value in that. And you know, Mark, there was a super insanely valuable post from one of our members, Chris, inside of our private community where he talked about driving for dollars. And it was like 30 something comments of people dropping in and sharing. And so, but that can't be the cornerstone of your acquisition or marketing strategy. So if you live in a market that has strong demographics and a lot of demand for storage, not enough supply, absolutely look for a facility in that market. But I think you're going to give yourself more opportunities if you start to expand and be comfortable with the idea of remote management. What I find is that it's just a knowledge gap. It's just understanding how the management system works because it's not difficult at all. It really isn't. If you talk to Mario or Kate or any number of people in our community who have bought facilities remotely, they'll tell you it's the first 30 to 60 days. Yeah, there's a little bit of a learning curve. And that's where you can lean in on the support and the people inside the Storage Wins community. But once you get past that first 45, 60, 75 days, it's kind of on autopilot for the most part.
Yeah, and I mean, also, if you think big picture, if you want to scale up, you got to utilize technology. If you just want one or two facilities, fine, you can be very hands-on. But if you want more than that, you got to utilize the technology, and you got to open up to other markets as opposed to the ones that are closest to you.
Yeah, yeah. And look, the last thing I'll mention is because I don't want to overstate it. Storage is not passive. It's not just people always talk about passive income, like storage, just buy a facility and it just runs itself and you just collect money every month. Storage is an operator's business. And so the better you are at operating the business, the more money you're going to make. And that could be revenue rate management, like adjusting the rates, putting upward pressure on the rates, customer service, doing the common things uncommonly well, making sure the facility's clean with good lighting, good security. You're taking care of your customers. You're making sure if any issues come up, but it doesn't require a whole lot of time is the point, especially once that facility is in a very healthy place from an occupancy perspective. And so, Mark, man, hopefully I want to kind of kick it over to you. Has this been helpful and useful for you? And if so, what's been most insightful?
Oh no, this has been great. I think a key thing with myself, just be a little bit more human, be a little bit more personable with the sellers. Slow down. Now being a teacher in the summer, I'm not as rushed, so just slow down, build that trust, build that rapport.
Yep.
And it's not going to happen on the first phone call. It's going to take many phone calls, many follow ups, which is fine, just part of the process. And the main thing that I've learned just from being in the community, just stay with it. It's going to happen. Be patient. It's not going to happen from one phone call. You have to do this almost on a daily basis. But
Yeah.
I'm up for the challenge.
I love it, man. I love it. Well, brother, you are knocking on the door, man. Just keep putting in the reps, keep plugging in. One of the things I want to acknowledge and appreciate you for is like even when you're busy, you always find time to plug into our group calls. Most of the time you're driving, right? And
Yes.
you got things going on with the family and everything and with work. But man, I've seen how you've plugged in, you've been diligent. This will happen for you. You just gotta stay at it. And if it takes you an extra month or two and you find the right facility, which you will, would it have been worth it? The answer is of course.
Yeah.
Okay. And understand one of the things I always say, MIA, massive imperfect action. It's not always going to look perfect and pretty. And if to your credit, which you haven't done this, if you're ever waiting for the stars to align, understand you're going to learn and grow so much more by actually implementing and executing and doing the thing you're learning than you are about just passively consuming information and feeling like you're making progress, but you're really not unless you're actually doing. So it's be, do, have the things you want. Become the person who's going to do the thing. And when you do the thing consistently and you have the right support, guidance, and accountability, you will ultimately have the thing you want, whether it's buy a storage facility or whatever it is that you aspire to have. So
Exactly. Everything is structured for me from a certain time. This is what I'm doing. Everything is intentional. This isn't by accident. It's not like, okay, today's 11:30. Let's do this. No, from 11:30 today to 12:15, I'm going to be cold calling. That's what I'm going to do. No excuses. Let's get it done. And then later in the day, I want to, from 12:30 to 1, I want to speak to some brokers. This is intentional. And this is a daily process.
Yep. Meaningful conversations, man. Just keep doing that. Keep growing. Plug in. Look at deals. Make offers. Rinse and repeat. That's what it's about. Don't overcomplicate it. Focus on the deal discovery part of our phase. The money will be there when you get the right deal, and then we'll work you through and help you through the operations, the winning the deal phase of our program. So proud of you, man. keep doing the work. And for those of you watching, if you have any questions, feel free to comment, whether it's on YouTube or Facebook. And if I can support you anyway, reach out. Just you can schedule a call, storagewins.com/call if you want to learn more about the community and how we can support you. And then, Marc, where's the best place for people to reach out to you if they want to talk storage, if they want to potentially joint venture with you on a deal?
Oh, great. At Marc Cohen 37 on Instagram. That's the best place. Or I could even leave my email, MACOHEN 1113 at gmail.com. You can message me. Feel free. As Alex also said, I do run a real estate meetup group, but we're trying to promote storage. I've been getting some Cubby reps, some guys who own facilities in South Carolina. So I'm always looking to monetize and expand my network. So please feel to reach out anytime.
I love it, brother. Yeah, guys, Marc runs a great community in the Long Island area. And so make sure that you guys reach out to him. And if you want to talk storage, again, we'll have his email and his Instagram in the show notes at some point here. But reach out, again, storagewins.com/call if we can help and support you in any way. And make sure that you're subscribed on whether it's YouTube, the Storage Wins podcast, and we're connected on Facebook so that I can continue to share with you what we're doing in and outside the Storage Wins community as it relates to storage. So with that being said, I am taking off to Europe in, I don't know, a handful of hours. And so, yeah, Marc, I appreciate you hopping on, man. And I look forward to connecting with you very soon.
Yeah, thank you. Have a great trip. Enjoy.
Thank you, brother. Take care, guys.
Okay. Bye.